Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin, here with my ever reliable co-host Teos Abadia. Hey Teos,
Hey,
what's
Shawn,
the
how's it
happenings?
going? Everything
I'm
feels a little
going.
bit different today.
It does feel a little bit different, and it's not just because it's Halloween,
No,
and
though it
it's
is
not just
for us.
because we're back from Game Hall Con,
That was
which was
nice.
wonderful. But we have some big news right off the top here. Uh, we are going our own way. We are starting our very own podcasting journey. We have been hosted by Misdirected Mark for the extent of our time here. Uh, Everyone there has been wonderful and supportive. Senda and Rob, when he was still with the network, Doc Palindrome, our editor, Jesse, great. We want to thank Chris Snezak and the people that started Down with D&D. And Phil and Bob and all the people at the Misdirected Mark podcast who were our Patreon conspirators for all these years. But now it is time for us to break out of this shell and swim on our own. So what do you think? What do you think about that, Teos?
It is exciting. It is exciting. Our hope is that we can do things like restart the YouTube channel, right? Which a lot of folks were enjoying, and then it was not able to be easily set up. So now we can do that. We can more easily respond to things. If a show goes up and it's the wrong audio file or something like that, it's a lot easier if it's just the two of us to get those kinds of things done. And these are things that folks have been asking for. But also we can be a little more responsive too. So we've got a new Patreon where you can
Mhm.
support our show. And now you're directly working with us. So you'll get the show notes directly from us right after we do a show. All the links in the show notes will be there for you. You can also reach us directly. So, sure, Tweetbag was fun, but now we can really have that as a primary place where fans can really reach us and say to us, hey, I want to hear about this topic, or I have this particular question. So that lets us be more responsive to you. And it lets us cover the costs that we've got with the show. Um, yeah. So we have new sites, right?
Mhm. We do. The first one is our Patreon, which is on patreon.com/masteringdnd. That's D, the letter N, and D. And we're also now on Podbean at masteringdungeons.podbean.com. So as Teo said, you can support us there. Many of you have been supporting us through Misdirected Mark, and we appreciate that, and we hope you continue to do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do have the spare change to give us some monthly incentive to keep up the good work, to get the episodes out, and maybe every now and then having some little extra um, fun things to give you, we can do that as well.
Yeah. All right. So shall we go to I don't know what we're going to call this. Is it still the tweet bag? Is it Patreon missive? What will it become? We'll see.
uh Twissive,
Twist.
Tweetive. uh
That's funny.
we will call it the tweet bag right now, since that is such a horrifying term that we
it's
wouldn't want to give it up, especially at Halloween.
it's especially horrifying now. Yeah.
Yeah. So our first tweet bag entry is from David at Cinnamon Games, and he wrote about inspiration in the 1D&D playtest packet. So he says the proposed changes create a whole system with racial features, feats, die rolls, and more laborious resource tracking to essentially create one more way to make an outcome more or less likely, i.e., yet one more way to gain advantage. Players don't get new verbs, new ways to express themselves. They just get incentivized to roll as many d20s as possible. This adds a problematic intrinsic reward to rolling dice, which, in my humble opinion, should be a mechanic to resolve uncertainty in an exciting way rather than being the objective in itself. To me, D&D isn't a game about rolling dice. As fun as rolling dice in appropriate amounts is, it can get to a point where it slows things down and hinders immersion. And yes, all of this
Yeah.
is true. Uh, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later when we talk about the current chapter that we're on in our 5e review. So I don't want to get too far into it, but it is one of these friction points between D&D as uh, a narrative story driving machine and a game that relies on dice rolls to succeed. And what is too much dice rolling and what is not enough dice rolling uh, is a matter of taste, a matter of preference. But at some point, there does seem to be a time when almost any player would say, "Wow, that was a lot of die rolling to get to this one thing, which we could have resolved much more easily."
Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't rolled. I haven't done a play test with these rules, but I have heard from some folks who are doing it, and I think it's been, okay. But there is that danger that when you know that rolling a die can produce this beneficial result that you get to hold on to, right? Inspiration, whether it's for you or for a buddy,
Mhm.
it does create that incentive to just try stuff. Well, let's just roll dice whenever we can, because rolling dice has a chance of giving us this lasting benefit, and that is problematic. I don't think it's hugely problematic in this version, but it edges in there to where one could consider, if two things are equal, but one of them lets you roll dice as part of it, that one might be slightly better because I might also get advantage.
Right.
And that's a kind of behavioral change. Like, you don't want people, to me, and we'll talk about this more later when we cover it, but it is that sort of thing of where you want to step back and say, what are we trying to do with inspiration? Are
Mhm.
we creating dice rolling situations? Like, is that the point? Like, maybe the point is we're going to engage people by making them roll lots of dice. That could be a thing, but I don't think
Mhm.
that's what they are trying to do, right? So then, and that brings out the
Right.
question of what you're designing and what is it attaining.
Yep. So, thank you, David, for that comment and question. Like I said, we will talk more about this later. And the second Patreon missive from the Tweetbag is Andrew at OZ_DM asking, should the next edition of D&D be designed for players or DMs? More powerful PCs and odd mechanics add to the DM workload. I didn't play 4E, but I gather this may have been a factor for alienated DMs. So, who buys most of the products, DMs or
Mhm.
players? Which is the priority, and what circumstances drive that decision? Boy, let's just get right to the heart of the matter here, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about D&D as a game and D&D as a product that is a business that is trying to be sold, what do we create and why do we create it? And does the creation of that uh, maybe make more money but hurt the game, or is making more money the point of the game, uh, which which is a game
Sure.
in and of itself? Um, so, should the next edition of D&D be designed for players or DMs? Teos, that is a philosophical
Wow.
question that I will leave to you for the moment.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. Yeah. In some way, I edge towards players in that I think that if the game is fun enough to play, and this is what's happened from the beginning of time, right? The game is super fun for players, but it then inspires someone to be the DM, either selflessly or because you want to be the person who is in charge of that, right? Who facilitates that. And when I watched my first DM for us, as much as I enjoyed playing, I thought, wow, that is so cool that they're doing this. I want to
Mhm.
do that too, right? And it wasn't necessarily about how great it was to be a DM. It was more that I wanted to play this function in our sort of social group, right? That
Mhm.
interested me and looked fun. The job of it seemed fun, right? Not that it was intrinsically rewarding, that it was too. Um,
Yeah.
but it is true that if you make the job harder for the DM, what I'd less say hard, because hard can be a lot of things, and sometimes it's just another form of engaging. But when it's intimidating, right? So, like, even right now, and it's true of basically every edition, when you ask people, let's say Adventures League judges that run month after month after month, and you say to them, "Hey, we've got a tier 4 adventure to run," easily half of them, if not three-quarters of them, will say, "I don't want to run that."
Mhm.
And these are
Right.
people who run all the time, right? So that intimidation level is high. And that, whether it's true or not, I mean, and it is partially true, that it is more work, less reward, that does get in the way of play. So yeah, I think you want to look at that.
Right. So I put up a Twitter poll on Twitter, obviously, at the Misdirected Mark, at the Mastering Dungeons Twitter feed. And the question was, what, as a DM, where do you get your enjoyment? And the answers were pretty interesting. I broke it down. You can only do 4 answers. I'm trying to pull it up right now. So I did, the first one is playing the monsters and the NPCs. So sort of playing the game of it. The next one I did was leading the story, leading characters through a story. One was presenting the world to your players, and the last one was using the rule system, adjudicating the rule system. And it's only been up for a couple of hours now, but so far the majority of the people have said leading a story, over 50%.
Yeah, and that's what I
Next
would
is
have.
presenting.
That's what I
Yeah,
did choose as well.
and
I
that's what I
voted.
chose. Presenting a world is next. So if you consider the story and the world as two sort of enmeshed things, that's 84% of respondents say this. Playing the monsters and the NPCs and adjudicating the rules are only at 15%. So that, to me, obviously a very unscientific survey at this point, but it shows heavily that most DMs, at least that are watching our show and interacting with us, it's about the story in the world. It's not about the dice overall.
Yeah.
And so what this question from Andrew says is, players like options, players like building characters to do certain things. Doesn't mean they don't like story, but that, when you're trying to sell things, that's what players are going to buy. They're not going to buy a book of, here are 10,000 backstories that your characters might have, right? They're buying the feats and the subclasses and those sorts of things. And if the players are focused in that direction, but DMs are getting the most fun by leading the story and by presenting a world, there is some friction there. There is, sometimes some heavy friction. So, what should the next edition of D&D be designed for? If we're looking at sales and if we're looking at interest, it should be designed for DMs to lead stories and present a world, and it should be for players to roll dice and have cool character options. Both.
Yeah.
So you don't want to give player options that aren't rules related, and you don't want to give DM options that are strictly dice rolling things. You
And
want to
tie them
market
up,
things,
right?
right? You
Tie
want
them
to
up with
market
that
things
work.
in those direction, right?
Yeah.
So, what is the priority? The priority, I think, is split. I think DM facing products need to be a certain thing and do a certain thing, and player facing products need to be a thing and do a thing. And they might not nicely mesh, but the market sort of speaks for itself, and what content and how that content is presented is pretty clear.
Yeah. No, those are good thoughts.
Yeah, I hope so. So thank you for those 2 questions from David and Andrew. Now on to our news and commentary section. We have been talking about the 1D&D playtest, and the second survey, the one that covers the 1D&D expert classes, has been live for a while now. It went live while we were recording at GameholeCon, and it is open until November 10th. So at the dropping of the show, you will still have a week or so to fill out that survey. So make sure you do so. Have you filled out your survey?
That is on my list for today.
Okay.
But I know that I'll be looking at my notes from what we've done in the last, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the last 4 episodes of
Mhm.
Mastering Dungeons. We went through and really broke, analyzed, broke apart the
Mhm.
different pieces of what this 1D&D playtest is. So if you
Yeah.
if you need to go back and check out those episodes, it is all there for you.
That is all there. And I was heartened. We don't have this in our news, but they're putting up, they being Wizards of the Coast, is putting up videos with Jeremy Crawford talking about Dragonlance and some of the
Hmm.
things. And the most recent one from a couple days ago talked about the Lunar Sorcerer, which they had in an Unearthed Arcana
Hmm.
playtest packet. And I was heartened a bit by Jeremy talking about it and talking about what is in the final version as opposed to what was in the playtest packet and the reasons that they changed some of the things. And it showed at least they were cognizant of some opinions, if not responding to them directly with what the final version is. Um, so this was my long-winded way of saying this feedback is looked at and it is
Yeah.
listened to. So don't think it's not, and don't fail to put in your thoughts because you think they're not paying attention. Because I think the R&D folks at D&D are listening.
Yeah, they are. And don't think that because you've said something, on your social media choice that somehow Wizards heard that, right?
Right.
The survey results by people who actually fill out surveys must back up the discourse to be the discourse. Otherwise, what it
Right.
shows is there's a giant split, right? And so
Yeah. It,
so don't
yeah.
think that just because you've said it on your blog or somewhere else, I've got to fill this out too, right? It doesn't matter that I
Mhm.
say it on a podcast or on a stream. I've got to do it or
Right.
it doesn't count. So
Right. Because the numbers are the numbers,
yeah.
regardless of what the context behind those numbers are.
And if they
For
do it at
sure.
all like they did in D&D Next, they're going to track these things over time, right? They're going to look at how things trend. And that was a big part if you look at any of these sort of post 5th edition creation videos that we've shared the links to in the past. They go and they look at, here is how the rogue class changed over time. Here's how the monk, here's how this was rated or that was rated. So it's super important that the results are as accurate as possible, which only comes from lots of people filling out surveys.
Yep. Yep. When Well, for years now, people have been asking, well, what about digital bundles with printed books? And it could never be done because Wizards never had a great online source of material to make those bundles work. Well, guess what? Wizards is now offering digital bundles. They recently offered the bundle for Dragonlance that will include the physical book and the D&D Beyond version at a reduced price. What else have they offered, Teos?
Well, it's, in addition to Dragonlance, which was something new, we've got old stuff repackaged. So you can pay $170 for the combined physical and digital rules expansion gift set. This is the Monsters of the Multiverse Tasha Xanathar's thing. So you get that in both digital and physical version. Or
Mhm.
$65, and this is interesting, for the campaign case terrain set, those little discs of the terrain we talked about, and a digital copy of the DMG, right? Because there is no digital campaign case terrain thing. So, and
Right.
the creatures version has the exact same thing. So you probably don't want both. And then $170 for the core rule books in the slipcase, plus the digital version of the core rule books, DMG, Player's Handbook. And they say this is for a limited time, but I mean, obviously, this is a thing we're going to start seeing. And I have a few takeaways from this, Shawn. So,
Mhm.
one is, hey, if I'm a store, right, your local friendly
Yeah.
gaming store, I'm going, oh, this is not cool. I'm in
Yeah.
trouble now. And then the second point being, I wonder if any of this is an attempt to sort of move product
Mhm.
prior to any new release. So there's plenty of time for that, but I'm curious whether at all it's tied to that because someone out there, in fact, a number of people on Twitter commented to me saying, why would you buy this now? To which I go, well, I love all my old books. I would buy anything at any time, but
Mhm.
yeah, maybe. I'm curious. Is that going to be a thing?
Yeah. And it's also good if you have extra inventory. Right. You can say, well, we have thousands of this product left over, these minis
Hmm.
or this. So we'll sell it. We'll add this incentive to also get free stuff on D&D Beyond, and everybody's happy feeling like they got a good deal. And I would worry about gaming stores, but if Wizard somehow does this with new books, regardless of where you buy them, then that would be helpful to game stores. I don't know is that they will do that. That's not what they're doing now because you have to get all of this stuff from the D&D store,
Yeah.
.wizards.com. But it gives hope that maybe there will be more of this for everyone to partake of the spoils of D&D sales,
Right.
because Wizards they do want game stores around, despite
Right.
the grumbling of how Wizards is killing game stores. That's not necessarily the case, and they do count on game stores for running things like Friday Night Magic
Hmm.
and running these other events. So there will be, I assume, something throwing game stores a bone and giving them something that will bring people in, I hope.
Yeah, and I don't super understand stores. Like the logic of it never really strikes me as logic that is something I inherently accept. Like I'm always like, oh wow, okay. So for example, when D&D Encounters came out,
Mhm,
I spoke to a number of gaming stores at a certain event where they were saying that is such a lifeblood,
mhm,
right? Like that is critical to us that D&D Encounter exists because it brings people to the store and they buy stuff. And without that, it would be a totally different picture. And I'm like, oh, okay. I wouldn't have, like I'd like to
right.
believe that, but I don't know that I would have believed it. And what I hear now is the alternate covers are amazing. And I've even heard people say like we feel so thankful that the really cool cover is the one
Mhm,
we get, and that
right.
these other alternate covers, are not that one, because that'll mean sales for us. And so clearly that is a thing that matters and that happens, right? And I think that it's stores are in fact counting on you go in and buy that one alternate cover, but you probably pick up another two things while you're there,
Mhm,
and that's what it really takes, right? And so if that at all goes away, or if it gets watered down, then that could be tough, right? If say the things had been flipped, if Dragonlance said the really cool cover is with the bundle that we do,
mhm, right.
and any other way you buy it you get a slightly foil version of the normal cover, well, that might not do it. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. So
Hmm.
we will always be keeping an eye on that on our news, ways that game stores are being supported. Um, Speaking of being supported by a lot of hot air, WotC Extra Life is partnering with Wizards of the Coast to raise funds for the Children's Miracle Network hospitals, as they often do. And this year, how are they doing that?
They're doing it
With
with
the Flumph,
flumps.
with the double Flumph.
We've got our
That's
Gamehole Con
right.
flumps that we're showing here on,
Gamehole
for
Con
those folks who
Flumps.
get our new YouTube video. Um,
There you go.
yeah, I saw this while I was at Gamehole Con, and I basically almost fell out of my chair because I've been running a Flumph adventure all weekend. So more Flumph was exactly what I needed. The shirt has Flapjack the Flumph Pirate. It's from Spelljammer Adventures, and the phrase "Be a hero, play D&D." And boy, I could not buy that shirt fast enough, Shawn. I
Mm,
know this shocks everybody, but yeah,
yeah.
it was all the real restraint was me not buying like 10 of them or two of them, or because my brain immediately like, what if I get a hole in it, spill some sauce on it, like I should
Right.
have a backup somewhere. And but I showed immense restraint and purchased only one of them, and the pin that is also available there. So
Yep.
50% goes to Extra Life. Magic the Gathering also has a secret layer drop inspired by children's drawings that's part of it, t-shirts and a playmat. So all of that is on the Magic the Gathering mtgproshop.com/extra-life-shop.
Mhm.
Link in our show notes.
So, from Flumps to Dragonlance, do you want a sneak peek of Dragonlance? Well, you can do that by going to DM or play at PAX Unplugged. Baldman Games is organizing the D&D play at PAX Unplugged this year, featuring the following games. They are going to play the first two chapters of Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. That is the hardcover adventure coming out. So you can sit down and play those first two chapters with one of the
Wow.
expert DMs from Baldman Games. They are also playing Dragonlance Vault of the Undying, which is an intro to the new campaign that was created specifically by Baldman Games. Lots of other stuff running there. What else do you got going on?
I mean, epic for the Vault of the Undying campaign, the Dragonlance campaign. D&D demos for 15 to 20 minutes. That's a nice length. I like that. And they were running those at Gamehole too. Really, really good stuff. And then a longer 90 to 120 minute intro to D&D game. So you, I believe, can still register. I'm pretty sure you can still register for this uh, at baldmangames.com/PAXU, link in our show notes. You can just run 3 slots to get a full show badge for PAX U. And you get cool stuff the more that you judge. So it's worth checking out if you want to DM or attend and play through all these really awesome things.
Mm-hmm. Awesome things are all about D&D because the D&D movie is bringing new D&D toys and comics to us. Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast has announced Dicelings, a set of toys that transform from D20s into monsters, Transformer style. We have seen the Beholder, the Owlbear, the Red Dragon, and the Black Dragon. The follow-up announcement also named the dragons. The Red Dragon is Thembershad from Out of the Abyss, and the Black Dragon is called Rakor, which we haven't heard of before, so maybe this is something new.
Yeah,
They
cool.
have also announced action figures from the D&D movie showing the main characters. Also, a foam sword and axe are shown based on the weapons that these characters wield.
It's cool. It's
Anything
all
else
set
that
up for kids, young kids to be like, I want to be like her, and wield this big axe and pretend to be a barbarian, and that's wonderful.
Oh, totally. Anything else from these announcements that you noted?
So I watched the video. It's funny. Everybody's trying to make like Marvel style unveiling videos, but it's
Right.
cool. The dice things look great. They are clearly more than meets the eye.
Mhm.
The action figures, look fun, and you can put them in the gelatinous cube that was for sale previously. It's not entirely clear what is gonna all be on Hasbro Pulse. I think on EN World there was some good coverage showing kind of what's where. So like the Dicelings appear that they will be in stores. I think the figures are only exclusive to Hasbro Pulse. Um, and then one of the things I really loved is there's a prequel comic book called The Feast of the Moon, and then a little golden book is being
Mhm.
released called Dungeons and Dragons: The Cartoon. And I mean that's classic.
Yeah.
That's great. So
Dungeons and Dragons, the cartoon, the adventure begins.
it
So
begins.
maybe there'll be more coming. I didn't think
Yeah,
Little Golden Book still existed. Uh, so that
yeah.
shows you what I know. And hey, more D&D is more better.
Yeah, I mean, you can pre-order the book, I believe. So, yeah, link in our show notes. That's amazing to see a little golden book for either people who grew up on them or who, as parents, have read their kids' little golden books. To see a D&D one is a
Yeah.
thing I did not think would happen, and we get ever closer to the benchmark, Sean.
Yeah, I know of the D&D
Hmm.
baloney. Hmm.
That's all we need in life.
It's all we're waiting for.
It's the
Uh,
sandwich that you need.
Yes. Polygon.com had an article about the surprising role that D&D and board games are playing in Iran. Uh, so in RPG and board game cafes, people of all ages, genders, and backgrounds are gathering to play board games in D&D in these cafes. In response to the strict rules governing permitted and restricted types of entertainment in the country of Iran. Uh, these cafes have become a safe option where people can relax and enjoy each other's company in public without as much scrutiny as they might get in other venues or doing other things.
And even the
Anything else?
ability
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
together. So the article was sort of saying like you can't get together with say people of a different gender in a whole list of locations, right? So but this is not subject to
Right.
that. So it creates this really nice place where people come together and just be really relaxed and play games. And D&D is a big part of it, other board games and other role-playing games as well.
Mhm.
Really cool
Yeah,
read.
it's a really interesting read, and you can find it in our show notes and also at polygon.com. Last but not least, the Dicebreaker Tabletop Awards. Dicebreaker is a game news site, and they've announced that they're creating these awards to celebrate the year's best board games and role playing games. The quote from the site was: "The Tabletop Awards will recognize both established and emerging talent in the industry, as well as games across a number of categories. In future years, we hope to introduce further categories to shine a spotlight on even more of the industry and the often unsung creators who work on every game." Uh, any notes on this?
Yeah, really cool. So we have until November 14th to nominate. So you can go to the to dicebreaker.com and then look for their tabletop awards section on their banner. And from there you can nominate anybody that you think deserves this sort of recognition. And there are only a few categories right now. I think that's the kind of downside to this is you have best board game, best RPG, best ongoing card game, People's Choice, which is Tabletop Game of the Year, chosen by public vote, Designer of the Year, Publisher of the Year, and then two Rising Star Awards, Designer and Publisher. And that, I think, what one of the things I look at with this, it's like, well, you're going to get some pretty popular choices here with these things.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I like about the Annies is that sort of everyday people can sort of win that nomination stage, and that makes it kind of cool, right? And that there's some excitement of could you be, a little bit of a dream. And when I looked at this, I was like, well, I don't know that a lot of people I know could possibly win one of these, right? It's sort of a too high a level. So I'm excited to see what they do over time building on this. It's smart of them to start small, and they're saying they're going to add more categories. So I think as they add more categories, this could become really interesting.
Mhm. And the winners will be announced at PAX Unplugged on December 2nd.